Hello and a very warm welcome. You're watching Gravitas with me, Raisha Sehgal. On the show tonight, we will tell you about the serious allegations leveled by Israel's Shin Bet chief Ronen Bar against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, accusing Bibi of wanting him dead in a battle for power. The allegations surface as Ronen Bar and Bibi have been at odds since the October 7th Hamas attack. We will get you the details on that on the show tonight. On Gravitas, we have been telling you about Israel's strikes on Gaza, but tonight we will tell you why Israel is striking Syria and the broader implications for the region. From India, we will tell you how the Deputy Chief Minister of Maharashtra, Eknath Shinde, has now said that Kunal Kamra was rather paid for cracking the traitor joke, further calling it a hit job. All that and a lot more lined up on Gravitas tonight. Let's get you started. Benjamin Netanyahu wants me dead. That's the shocking allegation made by Israel's top domestic intelligence agency chief, Ronen Bar. Yes, you heard that right. Let me repeat that. The head of Israel's spy agency, Shin Bet, has accused the Israeli Prime Minister, Netanyahu, of trying to imprison or, in his words, even execute him. According to reports in Israeli media, Bar told Israeli ministers, and I'm quoting him here, "Yesterday you accused me of treason. Today you're threatening to send me to jail. Tomorrow you will execute me." But why is Bar saying this against the Israeli Prime Minister? Well, there's history to this. Bar on multiple occasions has said that Netanyahu is trying to remove him as the head of Shin Bet. And just 2 weeks ago, Netanyahu made these allegations public. Take a listen.
Citizens of Israel, we are in the midst of a war for our very existence, a war on 7 fronts. At all times, but especially in an existential war like this, the Prime Minister must have full confidence in the head of the Shin Bet Domestic Security Service. But unfortunately, the reality is the opposite. I do not have such trust. I have an ongoing lack of trust in the head of the Shin Bet Security Service, a distrust that has only grown over time.
Netanyahu further accused the Shin Bet of attempting to topple his government. And his decision to sack Bar, in Netanyahu's words, was in order to prevent a civil war from breaking out and to ensure that Israel remains a democratic state. But Netanyahu was unable to proceed any further. That's because Israel's Supreme Court quickly intervened and put a temporary freeze on Netanyahu's decision to sack Bar. And it was not only the country's top court that took up this matter. Thousands of Israelis across the country condemned Netanyahu's decision and launched widespread demonstrations. On your screens right now are visuals from Tel Aviv from just 3 days ago. thousands of Israelis congregated together to demonstrate against Netanyahu for attempting to dismiss Bar, accusing him of removing people who opposed his rule and holding his government accountable. Now, the Shin Bet and Netanyahu have been at odds ever since the October 7th Hamas attack, with Netanyahu blaming the Shin Bet for failing to prevent the incident from happening. On the contrary, the Shin Bet's report found Netanyahu's policies on Gaza, such as allowing the supply of major funds to Hamas, including some directly, as one of the major factors leading to the attacks on Israel. However, Netanyahu has rejected all these findings. Furthermore, the Shin Bet is also investigating Netanyahu and other members of his office for allegedly taking money from the Qatari government. What for? For favorable interest for the Gulf state. It's important to note here that Netanyahu is currently under trial for fraud and bribery, among other such charges, for attempting to garner positive coverage of himself from Israeli media. According to reports, Netanyahu is aiming to replace Bar with a person who will drop all the investigations against him and his government. And a final call on whether Bar's dismissal is illegal will be taken by Israel's Supreme Court next month. Well, whatever the outcome may be, Bar's allegation of Netanyahu wanting him dead have only made this clash between Bibi and Bar increasingly bitter. We now shift our attention to Israel, intensifying its airstrikes on Syria. The Israeli military has confirmed yet another series of attacks on Syria, targeting two key military sites in central Syria. The Syrian military base of Tadmur and T4 that was struck by Israel just a few days ago. Now, these strikes carried out in Syria's Palmyra region have raised questions about Israel's strategic goals and the broader implication for the region. Is Turkey the new front for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu? According to the IDF, these attacks aim to dismantle military capabilities that remain at these sites in Syria. But this attack by Israel on Syria is not just a one-off event. Over the past few months, Israel has carried out hundreds of airstrikes across Syria, targeting naval and military bases and various kinds of military installations. Israel claims that they are attacking these areas in a bid to prevent advanced weaponry from falling into the hands of factions, including those linked to the newly emerging Syrian authorities. The backdrop to these strikes is Syria's evolving geopolitical landscape. Well, to start off with, the overthrow of Bashar al-Assad last December by HTS-led rebels. That has led to increased Israeli action over the past 3 months. Israel has entered the demilitarized zones in Golan Heights, including the UN-monitored buffer zone in this contested area. Adding another layer to this complex situation is Israel's growing apprehension about Turkey's increasing influence in Syria and its growing ties with the HTS government. According to reports in Israeli media, Turkish-Syrian negotiations could result in the Turkish army taking control of important and strategic areas like Palmyra in exchange for economic and military support to Damascus. Furthermore, there are reportedly fears within Israel that Turkey could establish military bases in Syria, such as the T4 air base, which could not just bring Turkey closer to Israel, but also embolden Syria to rebuild military bases, missile and defense capabilities in the southern parts of the country closer to the Israeli border. Well, according to reports in Israeli media, Bibi has been holding high-level consultations regarding Syria and Turkey's growing influence in the region, fearing that Turkish ambitions in Syria could become a direct threat to Israel as Turkey and Syria come closer. According to a report by Jerusalem Post last month, an Israeli government committee warned Netanyahu that a Syrian-Turkish alliance could create a security challenge, surpassing even the threat posed by Iran to Israel. As tensions continue to rise, the possibility of broader regional conflict looms. So the question being, are the Israeli strikes on Syria a defensive measure? Or is Israel preparing for a larger confrontation, with Turkey emerging as a new front? Our next story is about the Ukraine war. Just minutes ago, the White House released a statement on the talks between American and Ukrainian delegations in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, which has been happening for the past few days. It says that the US and Ukraine have agreed to ensure safe navigation, eliminate the use of force, and prevent the use of commercial vessels for military purposes in the Black Sea. It says that Kiev and Washington have agreed to develop measures for implementing a ban on strikes against energy facilities in Russia and Ukraine. And most importantly, the statement says that the US and Ukraine will continue working towards a durable and lasting peace and welcome third countries to support the implementation of maritime and energy agreements. Well, this statement by the White House, this is the outcome from talks between US and Ukraine separately. US and Russian officials also met in Riyadh. Earlier, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that Black Sea shipping was discussed with American counterparts and that Russia will be willing to strike a deal, but only if the US orders Ukraine to respect it. The American and Russian officials reportedly met for 12 hours on Monday. A statement from that meeting is expected soon, but as far as battleground is concerned, despite the ongoing talks to end the war, Ukraine and Russia are still exchanging fire on the ground. Overnight, Ukraine reported that Russia launched 139 drones and 1 ballistic missile. According to Ukraine's statement this morning, they shot down 78 drones launched by Russia. Another 34 were reportedly decoys that did not carry explosives and caused no damage. Meanwhile, in Kursk, Ukraine claims that an airstrike killed up to 30 Russian soldiers at a military site. Remember, Ukraine had launched an incursion into the Kursk region last August. But we've been telling you on the show here how in recent weeks, its forces have begun withdrawing under pressure from Russia. Both Russia and the US say that many Ukrainian troops were trapped in the Kursk region, but Ukraine denies all of this. Now, across the border, Russia reportedly carried out drone strikes in several parts of Ukraine overnight. The Kiev region was targeted early in the day, and firefighters worked to extinguish a fire at a warehouse. No casualties were reported. And in the eastern regions of Kharkiv and Sumy, Russian strikes destroyed several buildings and vehicles. Ukraine's military reported that Russia conducted 76 aviation strikes and used 794 drones against Ukrainian targets. Meanwhile, on Tuesday, the Kremlin accused the Ukrainian military of targeting Russian journalists in Moscow-controlled eastern Ukraine, resulting in a fatal strike. On Monday, a Ukrainian artillery strike reportedly killed 6 people, including the 2 journalists and their driver in Luhansk region of eastern Ukraine, which is controlled by Russia and where Ukraine launched an attack. Maria Zakharova, who is the Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson, described it as a targeted attack on a civilian vehicle carrying journalists. expressing condolences to the families of those who lost their lives. Meanwhile, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov accused Ukraine of targeting the journalist as well. Take a listen.
The fire was targeted. They were deliberately targeted to kill them. The Kyiv regime continues its atrocities against journalists and people who do not have weapons in their hands. This is the nature of the Kyiv regime, and this is yet another justification of our special military operation.
Now, here's why these attacks matter. You see, these attacks coincide with negotiations in Saudi Arabia between Russia and American officials. And that's regarding a possible ceasefire in the war. And we just told you about the statement that came out after the meeting between Ukraine and the US officials. Now, all this has been challenging as both Kyiv and Moscow sides continue to attack each other with drones and missiles. According to news agency AP, a major sticking point is that what target would be off limits to strike. While the White House said energy and infrastructure would be covered, the Kremlin has said that the deal referred more narrowly to energy infrastructure. Zelensky has emphasized the need to protect infrastructure like railways and ports. On Monday, talks in Riyadh aimed to address differences between Ukraine and Russia, including a potential pause in Black Sea attacks, which has happened from the Ukraine side. And meanwhile, on Tuesday, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that Moscow supports renewing the Black Sea initiative to ensure safe grain exports through the strategic waterway. But Lavrov warned that it must come with clear guarantees that Russia believes the US should demand from Ukraine. Ultimately, the talks in Riyadh lasted nearly 12 hours, while one part of the details have surfaced a short while back. We're still awaiting details from the Russia-US meet. And speaking of Ukraine, here's what else Ukraine is at risk of becoming. The longer it takes for a ceasefire to be established, Ukraine may transform into an arms paradise. Yes, you heard that right. A new report by the Times UK reveals how Ukraine is undergoing a firearms revolution. The country, which imports more weapons than any other nation and is facing one of the deadliest wars in Europe since World War II, is reportedly at a risk of becoming a weapons paradise. Surveys cited by the Times UK have shown that a majority of the Ukrainian population favors allowing civilians to own guns. Take a look at these graphics, these numbers on your screens. As you can see, in 2022, that's when the war broke out, over 62% of Ukrainians said yes to carrying firearms for personal protection, whereas 19% said no to carrying arms and around 18% said yes for special needs. But that's not all. In the years and months that followed, there's also been an increase in the number of Ukrainians armed with weapons. Whereas in 2011, less than 4% of Ukrainians carried a knife or a gun with them, the stats show that the number increased. In 2019, less than 6% carried personal arms. But in 2023, that's when Ukraine was at a war, more than 16% of Ukrainians carried arms on them. And when asked why, most Ukrainians cited by the report say that their perceptions changed after seeing Russian tanks rolling in their cities. They especially cited what happened to unarmed civilians in Bucha and Irpin. Remember, in the early days of the war, Russia was accused of committing the most terrible war crimes in Bucha, a town northwest of Kyiv. The city saw fierce fighting after it was occupied by the Russian army on the third day of the war. Reports say that civilians were targeted and pictures of dead bodies piled on the street It had invited global outcry. Fast forward to today. According to those interviewed by the Times UK, for Ukrainians, Bucha is a reminder of what happens to unarmed civilians caught in the crossfire. And so for them, the main priority is protection of their own. And it's not without reason. The country is at a war. For 3 years, they have faced relentless assaults from the Russians, a military superpower that has unleashed waves of missiles, drones and bombs on Ukraine, resulting in civilian casualties. Even though before the war started in 2022, most Ukrainians did not want firearm controls to be liberalized, and that sentiment has reversed now. Right now, Ukraine is the sole country in Europe where firearm regulations are not governed by law. Instead, a decree from the Ministry of Internal Affairs from 1998 oversees all matters related to firearms. Now, what this means is that the whole situation in Ukraine is pretty much complicated. In Kiev, there are many gun shops that reportedly sell a variety of weapons, including powerful sniper rifles and shotguns at low prices. To buy a gun, Ukrainians need to reportedly go through a procedure that just takes about 30 days, about a month, which includes checks and a fee of $1,200. They can own shotguns and rifles, but Ukrainians are not allowed to have handguns unless they receive one for service to the state. Now, critics say that this system is open to misuse in the future. You see, since the war started in 2022, the situation has changed dramatically. Even Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has encouraged citizens to arm themselves for defense, leading many to receive firearms from the government itself. And since then, a large number of weapons have entered the country, including those left behind by the Russian soldiers. Of course, experts are concerned that without a government program to buy back unregistered guns, post-war Ukraine could see more violence, with disputes being settled with firearms instead of peaceful means. Just to be clear, no one knows exactly how many weapons are in private hands, but estimates say that it could range from 1 to 5 million. It begs this very question: is Ukraine an arms paradise in the making? Well, let's now tell you what else is lined up for you on the show tonight. We will tell you about the leak regarding the US attacks on Yemen's Houthis, which took place on an app called Signal. What is the controversy, and why is US National Security Advisor Mike Waltz's future in limbo? We will also tell you about a fresh defense crisis and the impact of the Ukraine war on the Czech army. According to the country's defense minister, the Czech army is facing a manpower crunch, with the war in Ukraine driving soldiers to quit. And finally, we will tell you about the latest diktat imposed by the Taliban in Afghanistan. In the latest, they have banned women from selling hair or indulging in any kind of hair trade. We turn our attention to the Arctic region at the center of a rapidly intensifying global competition. The United States has raised serious allegations against Russia, accusing it of using its fleet of Arctic icebreakers as a front for espionage. These claims came from U.S. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. Take a listen.
Russia is using their cutters and icebreakers up in the Arctic to do surveillance on us, and we're going to reposition our fleet to continue to partner. I want to thank the Secretary of Defense and the Navy for all of their help and partnership too. We do operations together because their obvious Navy warships are in certain regions, but our cutters are faster and can work together in a partnership that's securing America.
So what are icebreakers exactly? These are specialized vessels designed to cut through ice-covered waters, ensuring safe navigation for other ships. But their role goes far beyond clearing icy paths. Russia, with its extensive Arctic deployment, operates the world's only nuclear-powered icebreaker fleet. Just last year, Russian President Vladimir Putin approved the construction of the Leningrad, a new nuclear-powered icebreaker, underscoring the Kremlin's long-term strategic interest in the Arctic. But why is Arctic so important? Why is it so significant? Covering over 1/6 of the Earth's landmass, this region is home to vast reserves of natural resources, including oil, gas, and marine biodiversity. Experts estimate the Arctic holds nearly 20% of the world's untapped oil and natural gas, making it a high-stakes battleground for global powers. And the Arctic has always been a geopolitical hotspot. During the Cold War, it was a stage for intense rivalry between the US, NATO, and the Soviet Union, complete with military bases and surveillance systems. Today, that rivalry is being revived, with both Russia and the US prioritizing the region's strategic importance. US President Donald Trump's recent push to acquire Greenland is just one example of this renewed focus. Adding another layer to the Arctic competition is China. Despite being far from the Arctic Circle, that's more than 1,400 kilometers away, China declared itself a near-Arctic state in 2018. This claim, paired with Beijing's ambitions to create a polar Silk Route, has raised alarms in Washington, Moscow, and other Arctic nations. Through heavy investments in icebreakers and scientific expeditions, China is aiming to expand its influence in the region and also access its resources. With Russia using its icebreakers and China aiming to increase its deployment, the question is, can the US outpace Russia and China? One thing is clear, the Arctic has become a key frontier in the race for global dominance. US National Security Advisor Mike Waltz's future is in limbo. The question being, will Trump fire him for adding Atlantic editor Jeffrey Goldberg to Yemen war group chats, that too on an app called Signal? What is the controversy and why is Waltz being blamed? Our next report dives deep into the details.
On the 15th of March, the US launched a decisive and powerful wave of strikes targeting the Houthi rebels in Yemen. It was news for all but the editor-in-chief of the Atlantic magazine. In an article in the magazine, Jeffrey Goldberg claimed that he knew 2 hours before the first bomb exploded that the attack might be coming. But the question is how. Goldberg claimed in the same article that it was Trump administration officials who revealed crucial details about the attack on a group chat on an encrypted messaging app called Signal. He said the group comprised 18 members, including Vice President J.D. Vance, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and Tulsi Gabbard, Trump's Director of National Intelligence. But what was a journalist doing in a group chat that only had top US officials? Here's what happened according to Goldberg. On March 11th, he received a connection request from someone named Michael Waltz on Signal. Goldberg accepted the request. On March 13th, Goldberg was added to a messaging group called Houthi PC Small Group. Conversations began with Waltz briefing the group he said was formed for coordination on Houthis. He further said that hours before those attacks started, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth posted operational details about the plan. This included information about targets, weapons the US would be deploying, and attack sequencing. His report omitted the details, but Goldberg termed it as shockingly reckless use of signal chat. However, Hegseth denied the claims, saying no one had texted war plans. He went on to criticize the journalist as deceitful and accused him of repeatedly spreading hoaxes.
You're talking about a deceitful and highly discredited so-called journalist who's made a profession of peddling hoaxes time and time again, to include the hoaxes of Russia, or the fine people on both sides hoax, or suckers and losers hoax. So this is the guy that peddles in garbage.
But National Security Council spokesperson Brian Hughes said the chat group appeared to be authentic. In his first reaction, Trump told reporters he was not aware that the highly sensitive information has been shared.
I don't know anything about it. I'm not a big fan of The Atlantic. To me, it's a magazine that's going out of business. I think it's not much of a magazine, but I know nothing about it. You're saying that they had what?
Democratic lawmakers swiftly blasted the misstep, saying it was a breach of US national security and a violation of law that must be investigated by Congress. Will this controversy cost Waltz his job? Reports say Trump would make a decision over the next day or two as he watches the coverage of the embarrassing episode. But going by the White House's recent statement, Trump still has utmost confidence in his national security team, including National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Our next story is from India. Indian stand-up comic Kunal Kamra is caught in the eye of a massive political storm for doing what he does best, cracking jokes. Kamra's jokes ruffled the feathers of the ruling political party of Maharashtra, with the Deputy Chief Minister Eknath Shinde calling it a hit job. Speaking to BBC Marathi, Eknath Shinde said Kamra's remark was not a case of free speech, but a case of undertaking a supari or a contract to speak against someone. Responding to the vandalism at Kamra's show venue, the Deputy Chief Minister even hinted at Newton's law. Shinde said that he does not support vandalism, but every action has an equal reaction. And while he has a high level of tolerance, party workers may not have the same. It is not only the Deputy Chief Minister Eknath Shinde, but earlier Shiv Sena leader Sanjay Nirupam also alleged that Kamra's show is funded by none other than Shinde's political rival, the former Chief Minister of Maharashtra, Uddhav Thackeray. Meanwhile, trouble seems to be mounting for the stand-up comedian. The Mumbai police are probing if Kunal Kamra's jokes targeting Shiv Sena chief were part of a conspiracy and whether the comic received money or any other form of help to mock the Maharashtra Deputy CM. Earlier, the Maharashtra government had sought an apology from Kamra, calling it a political contract act. The government also said that Kamra's bank statements would also be scrutinized to find out if anyone motivated him to crack such a joke on Shinde. However, Kamra held his ground. In a social media post, Kamra maintained that he does not fear mob and that he will not apologize for his comments. However, he agreed to cooperate with the police and courts for any lawful action taken against him. The comedian faces multiple charges, including defamation and statements conducing to public mischief. Now, during a performance at Mumbai's Habitat studio, Kunal Kamra took aim at Eknath Shinde with a parody of a hit song from the 1997 movie, what we told you about yesterday as well, Dil To Pagal Hai. He mocked the Shiv Sena leader who led a rebellion against Uddhav Thackeray in 2022, accusing him of being a traitor. and contributing to the fall of Thackeray's government and the party's split. In response to Kamra's comments, Shiv Sena workers vandalized the studio, a popular spot for stand-up comedy events, that has now been forced to shut down operations indefinitely. In the past 2 days, the debate around Kunal Kamra's stand-up act has primarily been focused on freedom of speech, but in the background is a more important story. The venue announced its closure in a social media post. But what went unsaid beyond the damage worth millions of the venue, it is the jobs lost of lower middle class employees who had no role to play in Kamra's recorded act. Neither did the venue's owner. But in the end, it is not the comedian or the lawmakers who have suffered immensely. It is the common people and regular employees at a venue who have borne the brunt of a joke not taken well. Our next story is from Afghanistan. Since the Taliban's return to power in 2021, the group has issued several diktats that severely limit the rights and freedom of women across the country. To put it in simple words, under the Taliban, women's rights have become history. It is perhaps a distant dream. Women and girls have been asked to stay away from colleges, schools, literally strangling their employment hopes. Taliban's crackdown on the rights of women has hit such a low that UN has called it a gender apartheid. Women have also been barred from parks and gyms, while beauty parlors have been shut down. In the latest, the Taliban has now barred women from selling their hair for wigs, further limiting women's ability to work, travel, and make personal choices. Now, before Taliban took control of Afghanistan, many women in the country found creative ways to support themselves and their families in the face of limited opportunities in Afghanistan. And one such way was selling their hair, often to middlemen who would then sell it abroad for use in wigs and hair extensions.
Before, buyers would come to the doors of shops and call out through loudspeakers to buy hair. They would buy shed hair for 3,000 Afghani per kilo and cut hair for 1,500 Afghani per kilo. Back then, we didn't think of selling the hair we collected because the business was good, we didn't need the money, but we kept the hair for ourselves. Now the situation has become very difficult and people are not allowed to sell hair.
However, some women in Afghanistan are selling hair covertly under oppressive circumstances. The Afghan women are risking Taliban wrath over hair trade. And one such woman is Fatima, who collects hair from shower drains or the parlor floor, braving the risk of punishment one strand at a time. She sells every 100 grams of hair for just $3. And these few extra dollars are extremely important for her, with 85% of Afghans living on less than $1 a day. And that is according to the United Nations.
I used to be able to sell my hair at my door very easily, but now we sell it with a lot of difficulties, with fear and trembling. Selling our hair helps us financially.
Fatima is just one of many women in Afghanistan who live under Taliban's draconian diktats, navigating through their limited freedoms, resisting in small ways or the other, and still dreaming of a future where they can regain their rights. Well, China has accused the US of interfering in Venezuela's internal affairs. And this accusation by China comes after US President Donald Trump announced 25% tariffs on imports from countries that buy oil and gas from Venezuela. The tariffs, he said, could come into effect as soon as on April 2nd. Well, China is the largest importer of Venezuelan oil, while other buyers of the Venezuelan crude oil includes India, Spain and the US itself. In a press conference, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Guo Jiakun called on the US to stop interfering in Venezuela's internal affairs. Also, he urged the US to abolish what it called the illegal unilateral sanctions imposed on Venezuela. The South American country has been under US sanctions for years, including a new round in January. Announcing the tariffs on Monday, Trump on social media platform Truth Social accused Venezuela of being very hostile to the US, of purposefully sending undercover tens of thousands of high-level and other criminals to the US. That's what Trump has accused Venezuela for. Meanwhile, the Venezuela's president, Nicolas Maduro, hit back at Trump's announcement and said they can sanction and impose tariffs on whoever they want. What they will not be able to sanction is the love and patriotism of the Venezuelan people.
Las sanciones de ayer las derrotamos.
Yesterday's sanctions, we defeated them, and those to come, we will also defeat them with work, inventive creation, love and patriotism. They can sanction and impose tariffs on whoever they want. What they will not be able to sanction is the love and patriotism of the Venezuelan people.
Patriotismo del pueblo venezolano.
According to Trump's order, the 25% tariff would expire a year after a country has last imported Venezuelan oil. The tariffs are likely to hit countries like India and China, which import oil from the South American country. In December 2023 and January 2024, India was the top buyer of Venezuelan crude oil at 254,000 barrels per day. India's oil import was nearly half of Venezuela's total oil export in January. Similarly, apart from India, China imported 500,000 barrels of oil per day from Venezuela in February. All right, now the ongoing war between Ukraine and Russia, it's in its fourth year, but it is now having a profound impact on the morale of soldiers in neighboring countries. In Czech Republic, there has been a major increase in the number of soldiers leaving the military. According to reports, the number of dismissals has increased by 40% since the beginning of the war. Czech Defense Minister Jana Černochová attributes this trend to the public climate fueled by threats of mobilization and deployment to Ukraine. She said that many soldiers who joined the army during peaceful times are now using these threats as an excuse to leave the Czech army. The Czech Republic abolished mandatory military service in 2004 and has since maintained a professional army. However, the latest data shows that 1,370 servicemen left the army in 2024 compared to 1,200 in 2023 and 1,300 in 2022. And this represents a major increase from the pre-Russia-Ukraine era when the annual number of soldiers quitting the army was between 800 to 1,000. Černochová's recent statements shed light on the motivations behind the rising number of departures from the Czech military. Her off-the-record discussions with military personnel provided insights into the challenges faced by the Czech Defense Ministry in perhaps maintaining the military strength and capabilities. The situation also highlights the broader impact of the Russia-Ukraine war on European militaries and, like I mentioned, the morale of the soldiers. Like Czech Republic in maintaining morale and retention among their troops, there also are other countries who are going through a similar turmoil. On recent visit to Ukraine, Czech President Petr Pavel signaled that his country is ready to join a potential foreign troop deployment in the event that Kiev and Moscow agree on a truce.
There was a meeting of chiefs of defense in London, whose primary purpose was to talk about modalities of potential military presence in Ukraine. And Czech Republic is ready to be part of that negotiation. And if there is finally a decision to create such a force, I truly believe the Czech Republic would be part of it.
On to Switzerland now. Swiss authorities have issued the country's first fine under the newly implemented nationwide ban on covering one's face that took effect this year. This is reportedly after a woman in Zurich wore a burqa in public, and that's when the fine was imposed. The controversial law, often referred to as the burqa ban, prohibits covering of the face in public spaces. This includes Islamic garments such as burqas and niqabs, as well as masks worn by demonstrators. In implementing this, Switzerland joins several other European countries in restricting face coverings. France was the first to implement a full burqa ban in 2011, followed by Austria, Belgium, Bulgaria, Denmark, Italy, the Netherlands, Germany, and Spain. Swiss officials have refrained from disclosing details of the woman who has been fined, citing privacy concerns. But they have confirmed that she was not a tourist. It is being reported that she refused to pay the fine of 100 Swiss francs. That's roughly $110. The case will now be reviewed by the cantonal governor's office. Well, just for context here, the ban on burqas stems from a 2021 Swiss referendum in which 51.2% of voters supported the measure, the ban on burqas in Switzerland. Initially framed as a crackdown on radical Islam, the law also had stated its aim as enhancing public safety. How does it do that, if you may wonder? By restricting face coverings at demonstrations and sporting events. And what is the punishment for violations if one does cover the face? Well, offenders face an immediate fine of 100 francs, which can increase to up to 1,000 francs if challenged in court. The law, by the way, allows exemptions for certain cases such as health reasons, cold weather, carnival events, and religious practices in designated areas, among others. The restrictions and also the exemptions have not gone down well with some sections. They argue that the law in Switzerland targets Muslim population of nearly 400,000 people. This is even as Swiss cantons had already enforced similar restrictions at demonstrations before the federal law came into effect. Moreover, they fear that such a move could also impact tourism. Factoring this in, will be imposing fines against burqas even be sustainable right now? That only time will be able to tell. The United States is facing a severe egg shortage driven by the worst bird flu outbreak in history. Since early 2022, the virus has wiped out nearly 170 million chickens, turkeys, and other birds, leading to a sharp drop in egg supply. As a result, wholesale egg prices surged 53.6% in February, forcing stores to limit stock and restaurants to raise prices. In response, the Trump administration announced a $1 billion plan to lower egg costs. This includes virus prevention measure, vaccine research, and expanding imports from countries like Brazil, Turkey, and South Korea. U.S. egg imports from Brazil alone jumped 93% last month compared to 2024, according to the Brazilian Animal Protein Association, that is. Well, beyond imports, the administration is also looking at regulatory changes to allow broiler chicken eggs laid by chickens raised for meat, to be used in foods like cake mixes and salad dressings. Currently, 360 million broiler eggs are discarded annually. As the U.S. scrambles to stabilize egg prices, it has also relaxed import restrictions. In January, the administration approved Brazilian eggs for usage into food goods, a shift from their previous use in pet food. Meanwhile, states like Nevada and Arizona have suspended cage-free eggs laws to address supply shortages. Nevada paused a 2021 law requiring all eggs sold in the state to be cage-free, while Arizona lawmakers are mulling removing a similar rule. These policy shifts mark a departure from past consumer-driven demand for cage-free eggs, as shortages and rising prices reshape priorities in the U.S. Moving on and shifting our focus to Canada. Canadians once topped the list of global travelers to the US, but they are now increasingly keeping away from traveling to the neighbor. The reason? US President Donald Trump's renewed threats on annexing Canada and imposing trade tariffs. Data shows a sharp dip in the number of trips taken by Canadians both by air and the land route. As per data from Statistics Canada, the country's national statistical agency, Canadians returned from 13% fewer trips by air to the US in February than they did a year ago. Not just that, land border crossings too fell, with the same outlet reporting that return trips from the US undertaken by Canadians in February dropped 23% from a year earlier. What explains this? You see, as for the Wall Street Journal, more than Trump's tariff threats, his annexation plans have caused a great deal of anxiety among the Canadians, who are now increasingly unwilling to take trips across the border. Reports of prolonged detentions for tourist and green card holders have further discouraged them to holiday in the US. Just after Trump announced new tariffs soon after he took office, then Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, encouraged Canadians to change their vacation plans to focus on exploring sites within the country and perhaps not travel to the US. And it seems to have worked wonders for domestic tourism. But this could be bad news for the US economy. As per the US Travel Association Trade Group, Canadians made 20.2 million visits to the US in 2024. And experts warn that a 10% drop could lead to $2 billion in lost revenue and more than 14,000 jobs lost. That's huge, and the impact is already being felt. Cities and small towns near the US-Canada border. And what does the Trump administration have to say about this? Well, it remained firm on the US president's conviction of turning Canada into the 51st American state, with the White House spokesperson Anna Kelly saying in an email that once Canadians become Americans, their international travel worries would be resolved once and for all. The Trump impact, by the way, that has not just affected the travel aspect of Canadians, but also their daily lifestyles. More and more Canadians are opting for homegrown options for groceries and other essentials. In short, they're going local, with more and more consumers embracing a Buy Canadian movement. Now, is this shift to going local for always, or will proposed tariffs in other sectors bring about a change in how Canadians think and act? The coming days will reveal. All right, need inspiration to exercise? Look no further. West Bengal Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee, who is on an official visit to the UK, took a jog in the iconic Hyde Park in London, and that too in a sari and slippers. Take a look. Well, that's all that we could pack for you in today's edition of Gravitas. It's now time to slip into a very short break, but we are leaving you with Gravitas Worldview. Thanks very much for staying with us. You are watching WION The World. Stay tuned.
WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide, because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION, World is One.
Imagine a world where owning your dream asset is just a click away, where wealth is no longer exclusive to the few. Tokenization, the game changer, transforming assets into digital opportunities. A revolutionary technology opening doors to a new era of investment. Don't miss Token Money Magnet, a bold initiative by Cult Foundation. Only on WION, World is One.
Ready to dive into your daily dose of news?
Bringing you what's trending in the West and all that's setting trends in the East.
And all of this served up with a side of insightful banter.
We don't just bring you the latest stories.
We bring you your talking points for the day.
And while you do that, from the busy streets of New York, I will provide you with deeper insights on the developments through the course of the day in the U.S.
The show that keeps you ahead of the global curve. A conversation you'd want to be a part of.
A place where news becomes an engaging exchange.
We bring you stories that impact your present.
This is World DNA.
Join the conversation.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
To bring the benefits of the Subhash Chandra Show to your educational institution, teachers and students, send an invitation to Juhi Jha at juhi@such.org.in.
The Earth is sending distress signals. Wildfires, droughts, and melting glaciers. Can we reverse the damage? Explore the harrowing effects of climate change. It's a wake-up call. Global emergency. Climate Tracker on WION World is One.